a river down in Texas that winds through white bluffed hills. It washes o'er the big rocks and flows through falls and rills. And as it makes its journey, it tells a tale to you. By looking through its waters, you'll see that it is true. Oh, river, Paluxy, revealer of history, oh, what is this mystery of footprints in stone? Did man and dinosaur roam on your ancient shore? River, Paluxy, revealer of history.
The past history of this planet and how life originated upon it have always been subjects of great interest. Basically, there are two major views. One, origin by evolution. Two, origin by special creation. Thoroughgoing evolutionists believe this universe and life within it came into existence by time and chance through a process of natural selection and survival of the fittest. This is said to have occurred over a vast period of time, as is outlined in this geologic timetable of evolution. Life is said to have started to evolve in the Precambrian, but fossil evidence is first found in myriad abundance in the Cambrian, which is generally dated at about 500 million years ago. Most everyone is familiar with the general order of evolution. Evolutionists believe the first cell evolved from inorganic material, and from this first cell, all forms of life eventually evolved. Such change to reptiles, and finally from the reptiles to mammals, with the primates and man at the top. Now we turn to the view of origin by special creation, as is presented in the opening verses of the Bible, which states, "In the beginning, God created." It then proceeds to outline the order of the divine creation week, as illustrated in this chart. The first day appears to involve the initial creation, including the Earth's basic structure. The first description we have of the Earth is of water covering its surface and darkness enveloping it. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. On the second day, the waters were divided into two great reservoirs, one above the expanse or troposphere and the other below. On the third day, dry land and the seas and vegetation appeared, and God commanded each kind of plant to yield seed after its kind. On the fourth day, God made two great lights, one to rule the day and the other to rule the night. He made the stars also. On the fifth day, God created the water creatures and the winged fowl and commanded them to reproduce after their kind. On the sixth day, God created land animals and man, and commanded them to reproduce after their kind. On the seventh day, God rested. A literal interpretation of the biblical account would indicate an immediate, full-grown creation having the appearance of age, with man designated as Lord of the planet. The creationists believe this original paradise was brought to an end by man's rebellion against his Creator, at which time sin entered into the world. The dreadful changes that are said to have taken place on this planet are known as the fall. "Dying, thou shalt die," God had said. Creationists also take the story of Noah and the flood literally. Many attribute much of our Earth's sedimentary and fossil-bearing strata to this divine catastrophic judgment upon the inhabitants of the ancient world. Now you're probably asking, what has all this to do with a river down in Texas, or man and dinosaur? Simply this: the evolutionary concept presented in this geologic timetable indicates that man and dinosaur have evolved in entirely different periods, separated by at least 70 million years. The dinosaur, having evolved in the Mesozoic, and becoming extinct at the close of the Cretaceous, at which time the most highly evolved mammals are said to have been small insect eaters about the size of opossums. Science textbooks, on the other hand, tell us that man did not evolve until the Pleistocene, about 1 million years ago. The biblical account, on the other hand, states that animals and man were created on the 6th day of the divine creation week. It would thus have been possible for man and dinosaur to have walked across the same mud flat one day long ago. It was while doing research on the subject of origins that I came upon reports that old-timers in the Glen Rose, Texas area had seen man tracks along with dinosaur tracks in the rock bottom of the Paluxy River basin. So I decided to check out these reports. Our first stop was the Glen Rose City Square, which reveals both reasons for the fame of this little country town, which sprawls along the banks of the Paluxy: dinosaur tracks and mineral water. Even the fish seem to thrive in it. Embedded in the nearby bandstand was a 3-toed dinosaur track. The sign below stated that it was 120 million years old. Our next stop was at the little museum, which displayed an artist's concept of the area 120 million years ago, with a great brontosaurus standing in the center. Charlie Moss, a museum and track guide, and probably the first man ever to see a brontosaurus track, showed us a photograph he took of these tracks in 1934. Charlie volunteered to show us some that could still be seen along the water's edge.
Now, this is a big brontosaur track here.
How many toes does he have?
Has 4 toe nails to each foot.
Are there a whole lot of them around here?
Yeah, there's quite a few of them around here. Up the creek here, in the water, and right on this ledge, on up this ledge here.
As we stared at these huge tracks running along the edge of the river, it was easy to visualize the great brontosaurus himself one day long ago as he lumbered through the mud with great 16-foot strides. A nearby reconstruction of this fierce-looking Tyrannosaurus displayed giant 3-toed feet with large claws. It was probably one of his cousins who left these fresh-appearing 3-toed tracks near those of the brontosaurus. Soon, we were involved in the fascinating sport of hunting dinosaur tracks along the Paluxy. Most of them were underwater. We found that even this sport has its hazards. Farther upstream, the McFalls advertised more dinosaur tracks and something they called giant man tracks. When tourists stopped by, they charged them a small fee to drive into the field and look at the dinosaur tracks on a ledge overlooking the river. What most interested us were these giant man tracks. Their stride and shape really were like tracks a man would leave in the mud. While Marion and I were searching for more of these mystery footprints to photograph, we were visited by the Somerville County agent, Doyle Cooper, who volunteered some interesting information about the tracks.
Now, I do know there are quite a few people, I think, that are real reliable people that said when they were younger, 40 and 50 and 60 years ago, that there were tracks here in the river and they saw them, and they certainly, if they weren't human tracks, they couldn't tell it, the difference in it.
Yes. We decided to record the testimonies of some of these old-timers.
Well, I found these human tracks up on the Paluxy here, fishing around. And they stayed there for 7 or 8 years, and a big rise came along and washed them away.
Can you point out the place here on the river?
Right back across the creek over here, away from that bank, about a third of the way out from that bank across there.
When was this you saw these?
Well, I seen them from about 1911 till 1918. It came a big rise in the fall of 1918 and washed them away.
Well, I would like you to describe the track.
Well, the tracks are about 16 inches long, something like that, and they were given steps around 4 feet or maybe a little over 4 foot, 4.5. And he was walking the first 4 or 5 tracks. Then he got up on the ball of his foot and went to running. And all the toes showed plain, but that track was about an inch and a half or something like that deep all over. And you can see the mud pushed up around the side, just as pretty as you could ask for.
They wasn't a human print. I have never been able to figure out what they were.
You saw them right along with dinosaur footprints.
I've seen them all together and right along down, and at that time I have seen them where the man would step in the dinosaur's print after he'd passed over. Some of them were bound to wear some kind of moccasins in the track they made. Some of them had to be barefooted because the mud had come up between their toes.
Now, did you count 5 toes?
Sure, just naturally as my own foot.
Was there an arch in the foot?
Just a very slightly arch.
Now, have you seen these same tracks that the men spoke of?
Same tracks.
They look like man tracks?
Yeah, look like man tracks. 5 toes.
5 toes.
Instep.
We went up there with his kids to see them, but didn't believe it till we saw them.
And you saw his 5 toes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how long would these feet appear to be?
Oh, they were immense feet.
Many other local residents told stories of seeing man tracks in the river and its tributaries as late as in the 1930s, both barefooted and wrapped or moccasin tracks. By this time, we were convinced that there was something of great scientific importance to be found beneath the gravels and ledges of the Paluxy. But what kind of an animal could possibly have made these tracks? We checked Dr. Romer's classical book published by the University of Chicago Press on vertebrate paleontology for dinosaur skeletal foot structure, but found nothing faintly resembling the human foot structure. Someone suggested that these were the tracks of the extinct giant sloth. But his yard-long clawed feet hardly met the description. At the Chicago Natural History Museum, there was a painted reconstruction of the giant sloths. These animals were obviously quadrupeds. Note their huge claws, which tended to curl under their front feet. Apparently, when these animals stood on their hind feet, it was necessary for them to balance on their tails. Their tracks or stride would hardly be confused with those of a human being. And supposedly, the giant sloth did not evolve until the Eocene and did not reach North America until about 10 million years ago. The same is true for the great apes. Their feet are more like hands with an opposing thumb. And then, of course, these primates are classed among the most recent arrivals on the evolutionary ladder. We found that the foot of a glacial bear, another quadruped, is perhaps most similar to that of a human foot. Still, there is a considerable difference. A bear's foot tends to be more square and stubby than a man's, without the angle from big toe back to the little toe so characteristic of human feet. The bottom of the foot is quite flat, and then there are the huge claws. We did, in fact, find on a Paluxy ledge one bear-like track with claw marks such as a bear would make. But, of course, we're told that bears did not evolve until much later in the Miocene epoch. Since no real conclusion could be drawn about the Paluxy tracks until better specimens were found, we organized what was to be the first of several expeditions to explore the river and remove overlying ledges along its banks. Mr. McFall and his dog watched calmly as the work progressed. But other local residents were quite shaken by all this commotion. Our crew of volunteer workers consisted of teachers, students, farmers, pastors, engineers, professional men and scientists, all eager to help uncover and identify the mysterious footprints. While their parents worked on shore, the youngsters had a grand time playing in the swift waters of the Paluxy, which we were told was the fastest flowing river in the state of Texas. Farther downstream, investigators look at a hole where a man named Jim Riles was said to have dug out a man track back in 1938. We decided to sandbag and take a better look. Laying plastic in the middle of a swift river was not an easy task. Once we surrounded the area with plastic, we then laid the sandbags inside, wrapping the plastic around the bags. Finally, most of the water had been pumped out and the hole where Riles had chiseled out the track exposed. We were more interested in the tracks which remained before and after. Turning our attention to the first one, we noted it had what looked like the remains of a right toe, a general elongated shape, and the appearance here at the front as though the remaining toes had gone in under the mud, which had then partially settled back into the hole. The most fascinating part was the human-like shape of this toe print. Take a good look at the human big toe. Note the typical rounded, fleshy upper segment and the line of demarcation at the joint. Exactly what we see here in this fossilized print in the rock. This unusually elongated print had long scratches at the front. These were not unlike the elongated indentations sometimes left by the human toes in the mud. We began to suspect there were really two footprints here. The heel of the second print appeared to have been placed on the toes of the first. First, the right foot, then the left, which had been cut out of the river. He feels his way through the mud, leaving a double elongated right print. This explanation made sense, except for the fact that the standard evolutionary table says that man did not exist at the time of the dinosaurs, whose tracks we found crossing the direction of the man-like tracks at right angles on the same stratum just 22 feet ahead. One question deeply intrigued us. What kind of a track had actually been cut out of this hole? Jim Riles, now in his 80s, agreed to come down and identify the area. While Jim and Mrs. Riles and Emmett McFall sat on the sandbags, John Reed, a visiting aerospace engineer, questioned them.
Mr. and Mrs. Riles, here in the Paluxy Riverbed in Texas, you dug up a number of prints of both dinosaur and human prints. Is this one of the places that you dug up a human print?
Well, I believe it is. I don't see why I shouldn't remember around 30 years. And I think I've got plenty of witness to prove that I did do it. Me and my wife taking them up, we worked as a team. We had to do something for a living.
This was back in the 1930s.
Yeah, and they didn't give us much to eat them days. There wasn't nothing but the WPA, and they wouldn't let me own it.
Well, you've taken the print right out of here. There appears to be another print up in front, and then there's one that is right back here.
That's right.
This would have been...
the right-hand foot.
This is the right-hand foot.
And I taken up the left-hand foot.
You took up the left-hand foot, and apparently an individual was walking across here.
That's right.
In the soft clay or mud or whatever it was at that time.
Well, I didn't know what else to call it, because it's the shape of my own foot. It had 40 good toes on it, and had a big toe, and it had the ball on my foot and everything on it. I couldn't see what it was a man's foot, but what made it, I don't know.
You helped in taking this print out, Mrs. Riles.
Yes, I did.
You used to swing the sledgehammer?
I used a sledgehammer, and he held the chisels.
How many days did it take you to take this print out?
Oh, a couple of days, maybe. A little longer, I don't remember. It's a hard matter to remember how many days we go to work every day. Somewhere, and just like you're going to town to work.
What would you say the weight of the print would have been after you'd cut the stone out?
I think it'd weigh around 200, maybe 250, maybe. Something like that, maybe more than that. They're pretty heavy rock when you get down and get at the bottom of a print, because you have to go so deep.
How'd you get it out of the bottom of the riverbed?
Well, I had a pair of old horses. All I had to do is put a chain on these things, fix them where they could move them, and they'd do the work for me.
What'd you do with the print after you took it up out of here?
I taken it over to Cleveland. I didn't take it. My neighbor did. Mike Falls had it over in his pickup, and I sold it to Dr. Cook.
We learned that thousands of old-timers, including Dr. Cook's son, had seen the 18-inch giant track in the late doctor's hospital garden. But now both track and hospital were only a memory. Having come to a dead end at Cleburne, we returned to Glen Rose, where Elizabeth Moss volunteered to show us some man tracks on a Paluxy ledge near where her husband had found brontosaurus tracks. Charlie, why didn't you show them to us when we were down here earlier?
Well, I didn't think enough of them, and because they're not, well, they didn't look near as good as the ones that I'd found before, and I was ashamed to show them because they didn't look as good on the track.
Well, let's see them anyway.
But they resemble a man's track.
Here are the 3 man tracks that I would like for you to see. This one in the middle here, near Charlie, has 2 plain toes.
But they're not as good as the ones that I found first.
We were indeed impressed with what we saw. These certainly appeared to be a man's toe prints, along with the general outline of a human foot. Note the toe pressure ridges. The others appeared to have eroded away. A visitor tries it on for size.
Look at that. It fits. It really fits.
And it really does. Notice how well his toes conform to the toe prints. To establish the location, we pan the camera to a nearby brontosaurus track pointed out by geologist Clifford Burdick. Seeing indications of other tracks on this ledge, we decided to wash off the entire surface, which had been covered with mud. Sure enough, the ledge began to yield other footprints. At the lower end, we found a 12-inch track which certainly looked as though it had been made by a human foot. There were still indentations left by the toes and a definite arch and heel. 7 feet forward and to the right, we found what appeared to be 3 or 4 man tracks overlapping one another. We dampened them, as we did most of the tracks on this ledge, to make the outline stand out more sharply for photographic purposes. This one shows the outline of the front of the foot, with all 5 toes indicated. Farther to the right, 2 others standing across a third. Note the deep toe prints. Over to the left were a number of smaller, child-like tracks. This one is 7 3/4 inches in length. The cast of the track clearly shows the indentations left by the first 2 toes, as well as a very deeply impressed heel and instep.
Todd, would you come here and put your foot in? Put the heel in. That's pretty good. How about you, Tanya? Now slide your foot back a little. Now let's see how your heel fits. How does it feel? Fine.
To write off these left-right man-like tracks as simply the accidental creation of flowing water, or to dismiss them as the carvings of some ancient sculptor, would tax credulity. Whatever the ultimate implications of such a discovery, our immediate goal was to discover more evidence, preferably to find tracks which had been hitherto unexposed. Back upriver, Jacob McFall led us to a promising location. At this spot, he told us he and his father had dug out a man track back in 1934.
Well, it had 5 toes. It had a good arch, heel. You could see it plain, just plain as anybody's track.
In town, the Wilson brothers, who had helped the McFalls dig out the footprint, verified Jacob's description. Although the track had broken into pieces, we did uncover 3 footprints leading directly to the spot. There was no question that the straight line of tracks, the left-right stride, and the general shape of the prints were uniquely human. Eagerly, we set about to backtrack the trail, with hopes it would lead under the riverbank. After lifting back the rock outcropping along the shore, we decided to clear the area of water by sandbagging. Since we had to fill and place 1,000 sandbags, weighing approximately 85 pounds each, we were happy for every volunteer worker. On this particular day, we had the help of a group of high school campers. They had arisen at 3 o'clock that morning and driven 150 miles to help us. Finally, when the area was sandbagged, we began pumping out the water and clearing the rock bottom of sand, gravel, and mud. first discovery was this strange track which some thought might have been made by a young brontosaurus. Our crew continued to clean off the river bottom with avid anticipation. But a look at the darkening sky upriver indicated that rain and probably a fast rise in the Paluxy was imminent. Everyone worked feverishly to uncover the remainder of the sandbagged area. Soon, tracks began to appear at the lower end, a long line of them. Excitement ran high, but time was short. Soon the tracks, as well as our sandbags, were disappearing beneath the rising waters. It is now time for even the most adventuresome photographer to seek higher ground. On shore, volunteer workers use their free time to get acquainted with the wildlife of the area. Everyone to his own thing. Mr. Armadillo is not so cooperative. Some of us used the time to study tracks which our workers had left in the mud. Again, we were amazed at the variety of shapes and sizes. Notice the wide toe prints on this one and the elongated scratches on this one. The divisions between the toes have already vanished from these tracks which have been underwater. Here we found a trail in the mud along the riverbank with a left-right pattern so typical of human tracks. Now the river has gone down and we have re-sandbagged our fossilized footprints. Note the tracks have the same human-like left-right stride. Some proved to be merely elongated slides. Others, such as print 11, were more clearly defined. As the sun's rays reflect from the hard rock pressure ridges around the track, it looks like it was only recently made. Note the human-like shape, the well-formed heel, the ball of the foot, and some indication of angle of toes. Although we were elated to find these tracks, we were disappointed to find them under river gravel rather than beneath undisturbed stratum. However, from this point on, the trail led directly under a thick layer of limestone covered by many feet of soil, just what we wanted. If bona fide man tracks could be found under this limestone, the evidence that man and dinosaurs have lived contemporaneously would be irrefutable. The first tracks which began to appear were three-toed dinosaur tracks. The animal's feet had sunk in quite deeply as he made his way across the ancient mud flat. And sure enough, there again was our line of man tracks crossing the dinosaur trail. Here, he had actually stepped into the edge of the dinosaur track while the mud was still soft. Biologist Mike Turnage, who uncovered the last three footprints, places his foot in one. He then shows us the unique human-like manner in which the individual had picked his way through the mud. All told, we found 23 of these human-like tracks, a few of which still retained toe impressions. This track shows how the toes slipped as the individual stepped sharply to the left. Here, ridges at the front of the track indicate the original toe prints. This track shows the outline of the ends of all 5 toes. Such evidence fairly shouts that these tracks were made by a normal-sized person who lived contemporaneously with the dinosaurs. Now, there remained just one thing left to find, the mysterious giant tracks, which the old-timers talked about. Although both time and money were running short, we decided to widen the excavation and make one last attempt to find this fellow. And suddenly, there it was, a line of giant man tracks crossing the dinosaur tracks at right angles and walking directly under the hill. This 18-inch footprint was the same length as the Riles track and only 17 inches from the nearest dinosaur track. It showed a heel, the general outline of a human foot, indications of an instep, and a rough outline of toes around which mud had flowed. As with most of the tracks, we made a plastic cast for a permanent record. The big toe is huge. There are also indications of a second, a third, a fourth, and fifth toe. Geologists told us that these ridges are the result of cracks in the original mud, which later filled in with additional material, a fact which precluded any possibility of their having been formed by water erosion. 6 inches across the toes and 18 inches long, it was the largest footprint we had ever seen. It had been uncovered just 55 feet from where Jim Riles had dug out the 18-inch man track back in 1938, and thus may have been left by the same individual. By this time, farther downstream, we had also found some giant 16-inch footprints, of which we made plaster casts. Since the large size of these 16 and 18-inch tracks caused some to doubt that they could possibly have been made by human beings, we set out to learn whether there were men living today with feet large enough to fit them. In Chicago, we found an 8-foot 2-inch giant named Henry Height. I am 5 feet 10, a rather average height, but felt very small indeed next to this man. Then those feet.
Well, they're a size 22 shoe, and they're made special. They cost $110 a pair. You see, I wear a size 16 glove.
16, that is a big hand.
My toes fit in there pretty good, but it's not quite as wide. My foot is not as wide. I think if I'd have went barefooted all my life, my foot would have been that wide too, because when I was a kid, I used to try to cramp my feet into small shoes, and it was real painful, you know.
In spite of his curled toes, Henry Height's feet gave convincing evidence that man could indeed have feet 16 inches in length. Next, we sought a giant to fit the even larger 18-inch track, and found the foot of Eddie Carmel of New York to be just about right. We were satisfied we had found man tracks in situ with dinosaur tracks. But would scientists really accept them as man tracks? Our final step was to invite a number of scientists to come to Glen Rose to evaluate the tracks and give us their frank opinions.
The fact that there are a number of them, the fact that they are elongate, the fact that it seems as though this individual was a bipedal individual, walking only on 2 legs, does suggest that the problem is certainly at least open to further investigation. Very frankly, if these were not made by man, we do not know what kind of an animal did produce them.
Although some of the erosion has removed the detail of the toes, still there's enough to show the shape of a foot, especially when we put a human foot in the track. It seems to fit so perfectly. But to me, the picture becomes more and more complete and more convincing all the time that they were tracks here which could be called human without stretching too much of a point.
It seems to me it has to be made by an animal of some kind. Now, as to whether that animal is human or not, if we look at some individual tracks, you can see some of them where there's a good mark of a heel, the instep, and some places there are indentations that could well be toes, but always the angle comes right back, just at the angle from the big toe back to the small one. There'll be rights and lefts, and again the heel, the instep, and the angle from the toes. If it weren't that this is in Cretaceous, in the table, in the limestone, I don't think there'd be any question but what these are human footprints. But since they're out of place, according to the geologic timetable, then there gets to be considerable question, are they really and truly human footprints? I'm not ready to say I'm positive they are, but there are so many. And again, as I say, in line, they have to have been made by some organism, I believe, and they well could be human footprints. In fact, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there's more digging, and it might finally be authenticated that they are really human footprints.
some of them, people say they see toe marks on them. I do see erosion marks, and some of these marks may be an original impression in the sediment. I'm not at all convinced that these tracks, which are considerably weathered, are sufficiently intact to say that these are toe marks or moccasin prints, as some others have said. I just don't see a clear case for establishing these definitely as human footprints. And so I think I'll have to go on record as saying I doubt the allegation very strongly.
I think they're made by man. The geometrical arrangement of them seems to indicate a man striding across a mud bank. Some of them show some very good detail in regard to toes, the instep, and the general shape of the foot. Here and there are prints that seem to have been made by someone wearing moccasins or something of that nature. As the best I can tell, these tracks seem to be man-made.
These, in many cases, are eroded. And of course, it doesn't take long once a track is exposed before it becomes almost unrecognizable, just a few years. But at the same time, there's still many that are quite good, both dinosaur tracks and what appear to be human tracks. As a matter of fact, we know of no other type of animal, past or present, that could have made these tracks other than man. And there's no clear reason why man couldn't have made them. We could say, for example, that if they had been found in some more recent formation, that there would be no question that they were human tracks. The main reason why some have doubted they're really man tracks is because it doesn't fit in with the accepted system. The dinosaur is supposed to have died out about 100 million years ago or so, and man only to appear about 1 million years. So the evolutionary chronology and system doesn't square with the assumption that man and the dinosaur lived at the same time. But we feel that it's the system itself, the evolutionary uniformitarian system of chronology, that needs to be brought under some real scrutiny. After what we have just seen and heard, I am sure that you will agree that the implications of the Paluxy findings are most intriguing. I have invited Dr. John Moore, professor of natural science at Michigan State University and co-editor of a new high school biology textbook, to help us evaluate the findings. Welcome, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Stan. It's a real pleasure to be here today.
One of the first things I'd like to know is what you think of the tracks. Do you consider them human?
Well, Stan, I've never visited the excavations, but I know a number of scientists who did. And after listening to their conclusions and studying your pictures, where you show a sequence of very human-like tracks for a pattern of 23, I'm quite strongly inclined to believe that you have found man tracks in conjunction with dinosaur tracks.
My next question is, what do these tracks mean to you as a scientist?
From the standpoint of evolutionary thinking, the implications are earth-shaking. According to your evidence, man and dinosaurs existed at the same time. At the very least, if accepted, these tracks make the upper portion of the geologic time scale ridiculously inaccurate. And if the upper portion is inaccurate, which represents, according to evolutionists, the more recent time span, then one is inclined to be even more skeptical of the lower portion. Furthermore, another reason for distrust of this chart is that one cannot dig into the Earth anywhere and find this entire geologic column in this order. And in many places, the order of strata is quite contradictory to this chart.
Well, then, what is your view of the theory of evolution?
By 1962, I had come to realize with a good number of other scientists that the amoeba to man thesis, that all of the living things in the world have arisen from a single source, which evolved from an inorganic beginning, was an untenable theory. Untenable, that is, in light of what we know today from such areas of science as genetics, and geology, mathematics, and thermodynamics. In fact, at a recent meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, I pointed out that the available empirical evidence fits the idea that the many forms of life had separate beginnings.
I see. Well, Dr. Moore, How do you explain the origin of life?
I believe it came into existence through special creation. In fact, I'm a member of the Creation Research Society, which has a membership of several hundred scientists who recognize the inadequacy of the evolutionary theory and maintain that the known facts of science actually fit the biblical model of special creation better than the neo-Darwinian theories.
Since you believe the biblical account of creation, do you also believe the biblical account of man's rebellion against God and subsequent fall?
Indeed, I do. If you remember, God had warned Adam, if you disobey, dying, you shall die. I believe that the principle of death and decay, which involves the second law of thermodynamics, a basic law in science, went into effect at that time. As the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans, the whole creation was subjected to futility and slavery to corruption.
Do you also take the rest of the Bible seriously?
Yes, Stan. I believe the Bible is God's inspired message to man, and that it is the record of his effort to reconcile man to himself. I sincerely hope that these tracks you have uncovered and documented along the Paluxy will cause many to realize that the great issues of life, man's origin, salvation, and eternal destiny, must be based on the divinely inspired, changeless Word of God, rather than on the passing theories and philosophies of men.
Both skeptic and believer have come from far and wide to peer into your waters and stand in awed surprise. Could man have lived at that time when dinosaurs walked here? Then geologic tables are incorrect, I fear. O river Paluxy, revealer of history, no longer a mystery, those footprints in stone, both man and dinosaur roamed on your ancient shore. River Paluxy, revealer of history. Paluxy, Paluxy, oh wondrous river